Good morning, good afternoon. It's a pleasure once again to present my top trends for this year, for the 10th year that I've been doing it, albeit under unique circumstances. The rationale behind these trends, twofold. One, to set context for our customers, partners, and employees around the investments that we're making in R&D with 25,000 engineers and some of our acquisitions. To give that context from the outside in terms of some of the transitions coming towards us and why we want to invest in certain areas. And the second reason is to get your feedback. By giving you some insight into where we think things are headed, we can get insight from you and feedback from you in terms of whether we're on track or not. I do want to make a couple of comments about the current crisis, because when I began this work towards the end of last year, I had no idea of where we're at today. Now, while I've had to change and tweak a bit here and there, most of it is actually still intact, and I hope that you too will see that most of it is even more relevant to the current situation. The format is quite simple. I'll go through the trends, I'll end up with a summary and a URL to my blog site and the references. I've had to cut it back a little bit for this virtual presentation, but you can read more at the back end. I want to begin the trends with AI, which have begun in many of my previous predictions, but I want to roll it forward to where we are today and what's going to change. And it's in the byline, serving humans at scale. Kai-Fu Lee, an AI expert, been in the business for over 30 years, in his book says, much of the difficult but abstract work of AI research has been done. It's now time for us to roll out our sleeves and really get it out there. Whether it's in medical science, whether it's in business, whatever. The tools are there, the research has been done, let's get on with it. Stuart Russell, another AI expert. AI is rapidly becoming a pervasive aspect of the present, but it is the dominant technology of the future. Bringing it back down to earth, MMC did some research in the last 12 months, and they found that software developers in the US were earning half of their counterparts who are AI engineers in the United States today. It's happening today. Bringing it closer to home in Australia, LinkedIn did a survey of 10 million businesses, and what they found was the #1 emerging job for 2020 was the AI specialist. Now, for several years, I've been using game theory as an exemplar of how the progress of AI. I've talked about DeepMind, I've talked about AlphaGo, AlphaZero. I now want to talk about another latest development from DeepMind called DQM. It's an AI program that was written literally to learn and win games. It's learned over 49 Atari video games entirely from scratch, but there's something very different about it. It looks at the pixels on the screen, and based on whether those pixels are moving in a particular direction and winning or not, using reinforcement learning algorithms, it learns how to play the game without knowing the rules at all. So it doesn't have any a priori knowledge of these games, and yet within hours it's beating humans in most cases. So what do we take out of this? First of all, non-linear algorithms a la AI are executing so much faster than linear algorithms would have done in the past. And the second thing is, we're beating humans without knowing the rules. We're just looking at patterns, and based on that patterns, an AI making inference. How can that be applied to other areas? We already know companies that are leveraging this in the stock market. Without knowing the company, they're just looking at trades and looking at patterns, and based on those trades, trading themselves. Cancer detection, plenty of work going on in that area. And how can we perhaps use reinforcement learning algorithms to look at the genome and perhaps address the current COVID-19 problem that has befallen us? Now, many of these tools are widely available. As I said, serving humans at scale. The tools are now widely available. You can see some of the big names in public cloud from Google itself. You can find a catalog of AI tools in deepindex.org. Plenty available today. So it really has been democratized. So the next section I want to talk about, the next trend I want to talk about is network transformation. How do we need to look at the network in terms of the next decade, the cognitive era? The internet for the future. We know the pattern continues. The pattern in terms of traffic growth, up to 400 exabytes up until 2022. 30 billion connections by then. The demand for more video and a better user experience is inexorable, and it keeps going up. The challenge we've got is with our telcos, whose ARPUs, the average revenue per user, keeps going backwards. It just so happens that we're now in a really pickle, if you will, something that Cisco's been talking about, the use and the demand on the network for several years. And now, literally overnight, with the current situation, we're seeing this demand skyrocketing, such that the Australian government and the NBN has sought fit to increase capacity another 40% because of the situation we find ourselves in. So a couple of things. Basically, both commercially and technically, it is unsustainable. We really need to rethink the architecture of the internet for the future, both from a technical perspective as well as a commercial perspective. Now, last year I told a story of a customer who said to me about 8 years ago that for his large global organization of 256,000 people, everybody was going to connect to the network wirelessly. They weren't going to buy any more wide area networking, any lease lines, any more MPLS. They were just going to use the internet. And no more data center infrastructure. They were going to go straight to the public cloud. And that was 8 years ago. Well, my friends, what we do today is we find ourselves with many of our customers in that situation. Access to public cloud, data center, SaaS, and internet. We call that the software-defined edge. And for the last decade, Cisco's been building technology to enable you to really move those workloads in and out of that cloud and leverage those services under policy. And policy is a key word here, software-based policy. And as we move into public clouds, we've extended our capabilities to enable the policy for that to be controlled not only in your private network and infrastructure, but on the public cloud as well. SD-WAN, we said last year, was going to skyrocket in 2019, and we've absolutely seen that. We've seen the complete transition towards multiple types of circuits, policy-enabled and highly secure through segmentation by leveraging SD-WAN. At the same time, very recently, Cisco's been making some technology developments with some of our friends in the public cloud, enabling more sophisticated capability for SD-WAN straight into the public cloud. And of course, SD-Access also enables that simplicity, the agility on the campus to enable end-to-end secure communication. All under, and here's the punchline, all under one policy. A policy that enables you to secure your organization, prevent data breach, maintain regulation from one end of the network to the other. So what we've been working on is essentially moving from an open loop operation management system to a closed loop management system where we measure, manage, analyze, and then take action. We call that intent-based networking. And essentially what we're doing with IBN is mimicking the central nervous system of the human body, where our bodies, literally we touch, we think, and we act. And we're doing exactly that with IBN. The benefits, first of all, we can scale that infrastructure. And secondly, as we scale it, we can do more with less humans. We can augment human capability to really manage and operate now these large-scale networks. The next transition I want to talk about is cloud and edge. Now, we've been talking about an acceleration to cloud for several years. We believe, and I believe, that COVID is going to accelerate that even further as more and more of us are looking for equipment-free services. Now, a couple of years ago, I put this similar slide up where I talked about the end of cloud as we know it. And I went back in time in 2003, talked about virtual machines. And as we came up with these virtual machines, we realized the benefits and the efficiencies of virtualization. In fact, it was such a huge benefit that everybody scrambled to provide public cloud services. And there was a great deal of turbulence at the time. A lot of companies actually lost their shirts over it. The last few years, things have settled down quite a bit. The skies have cleared. We now know who the major public cloud providers are. We also know that there are certain applications that will never go into the public cloud. Now, the last 12 months and probably the next 12 months has been a battleground between all of the providers to maintain customer control. intra and intercloud, and we're going to see that persist over 2020. But I now want to just touch on the next phase at the beginning of this cognitive era, wherein we're going to see intelligence being distributed away from the public cloud. Hopefully the next slide will explain this a little bit more clearly. I'm going to hop through this pretty quickly. The way you can look at your workloads is through these three vectors. One is the evolution of the applications, where we started with bare metal, and where today we're pretty much looking at development around microservices and containers. Why? Because we can focus the application developers on being cloud native and the app itself, such that we don't really need to worry too much about the infrastructure. Now, it's interesting too to see some of the public cloud providers even providing quantum-based services. AWS announced Bracket, basically for experimentation. The second axis is about the management, security, and operations. Gartner calls it AI Ops. Very important aspect. And what Cisco's been working on for several years now is to instrument the entire stack, to be able to look deep inside the plumbing through tetration all the way up to the application itself, and to put telemetry into that application so that we can put some measurement around it, so that if we need to move that workload, we know that we're going to go from bad to better, not from bad to worse. And we can only do that if we've got the metrics. And the third axis is really about this fourth phase that I've talked about, distributed intelligence. Distributing the intelligence out from the cloud to where it's needed in situ. Let me give you an example of Meraki cameras. A Meraki camera is now a very intelligent camera. It's got 256 gigabytes of memory on board, and it does a lot of pre-processing in the camera itself. It doesn't need to go to the cloud. We've got one of our customers has got over 3,000 stores. 10 years ago, it had 20 connections per store. This year, it's got well over 2,000 connections per store across 3,000 stores. If you do the numbers, you can see that a lot of that data and a lot of the processing is not going to be done in the public cloud. It's going to be done at the edge. The next transition I want to talk about has really been in every single one of my presentations in the last decade, and it's about security and security transformation. And this is a bigger topic than ever before, and it's going to continue as such as we are in this current period. The bad guys are still winning. Let's face it, we have customers today who have to endure attacks, sometimes 1 million attacks a day, in some cases 1 billion attacks a day. A hacker only needs to get in once. So the scales are tipped very much in favor of the hacker. And we've got to secure these enterprises from that one attack. Forrester claims that ransomware skyrocketed 500% last year. There was local examples of that, one of which refused to pay ransomware. The cost to the world, $11.5 billion in 2019 alone. By the way, if you are attracted to use the COVID-19 tracker app, do not use it. It is ransomware. Do not download it. Cisco did some research across Asia-Pac in the last 12 months, interviewed a bunch of companies, and the results were this. 25% of those respondents had already experienced attack in their operations. I'm not talking about IT, I'm talking about OT. 25%. But 73% expect this trend to increase in the next 12 months. So there's a shift in the attack focus from IT into OT. And we're going to see a big pickup in the next 12 to 24 months. Why is all of this happening? Well, that perimeter is no longer sufficient. Especially now that we're in lockdown, we're all working all over the place, not in our offices anymore. We could be working anywhere. So therefore, the perimeter is essentially you. This was the rationale behind Cisco's acquisition of Duo a few years ago. And Duo is essentially technology that provides what we refer to as zero trust or default deny. In other words, every employee in Cisco or of our customers are not allowed in the network by default. We want to know a few things from you. Who are you? Where are you? What device have you got? What are you trying to do on the network? And based on that, we'll allow you into the network. The hardware that we build has to be trustworthy. We've got to be able to slice and segment public mobile networks, 4G, 5G. We've got to be able to do the same again in the enterprise, which is one of the attributes of SD-WAN, the ability to segment and quarantine those networks, that part of the network that has already been attacked. We need today to have what we call global eyeballs, the ability to see once and block everywhere. If there's attack in Russia, we've got to be able to prevent that attack from going anywhere further than that in your own country. And as Gartner refers to AI operations, humans can no longer really manage the complexity of running a secure operations center. We need to augment that human operation capability with AI. We also need to be wary of the fact that many of our customers have got multiple security tools. Cisco announced a few weeks ago via a product called SecureX, the ability to integrate that through one pane of glass. So from a Cisco viewpoint, we see it in three particular focal points. The workforce, which is now spread everywhere as a result of the COVID-19 virus. The workplace, which is kind of empty at the moment, but will all be coming back in hopefully not too distant future. And the workload. The workload is particularly important because no longer is that workload on your premise or on your server or on your machine. It could be in any public cloud, and we need to be able to secure you from that. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, just like AI is helping the good guys, the not so good guys are also aware of AI, and they're leveraging AI, first of all, to find softness such that they can breach your organization, and they're also looking for your use of AI for softness so that they can breach that as well. So AI is another new attack vector that we've got to deal with. So just to wrap, here are my top trends for 2020. I didn't cover 5G, but you can find that at this URL, which has got over 1,000 references as well, and you can read a lot more on that particular topic. So before we end, I want to just reflect on where we are today. History has demonstrated several times how humans have addressed major societal and economic challenges. And I'm sure none of us witnessed anything like what we're going through today. Yet, with the technologies that I've presented, as well as some that I haven't, coupled together with human ingenuity, there is plenty of hope. Just remember, betting against human ingenuity is foolhardy, particularly when our future is at stake. Thank you.